Welcome everyone to the May 4th, 2023 Helm Developer Call. And what we'll normally go through here is any announcements, and then we'll get into discussion topics. If there are any shout outs or anything else, we'll go through that. And so with that, there are two announcements that I've got. The first one is that Helm 3.12.0 release candidate 1 is out. This does include some changes that are worth testing out in folks' environments. And so I would suggest, if anyone's concerned about it, give it a try. But it's out next Wednesday is the planned release day. So in 6 days. And so unless we have another release candidate pop up where we have to give it a couple of days for people to test it after release candidate comes out. But the planned date is next Wednesday for release. And then the next announcement I have is that Julian, who's on the call here today, has been voted in as a maintainer. We also had a few other maintainers go emeritus. We finally processed through that. I connected with those 3 maintainers, Adam Reese, Nikhil, and Matt Fisher, who have been mostly inactive or been inactive. They're off doing other things. It's hard to get a vote when they're not around. So they have gone emeritus, and the vote has closed on Joe, and you're in. So congratulations, Joe. We're happy to have you. We need to get you onboarded so you can start doing some of this stuff. So let's get some time together in the next few days to do that. The other thing we do have going on with that is we have 2 folks who have thrown their name in the hat for triage maintainer, George and Ian here. And so we'll be going through that. I'm holding off until Joe's onboarded to everything. So he has the option of voting in these things, right? So I need to get him into the right places to vote. But that's what's going on there. Does anybody else have any other announcements? Silence means nothing. So discussion, if anybody has discussion points, please add them to the notes doc. Has it been shared? Yep, the notes have been shared. Please add them there. Otherwise, I see Ian, you've got one on the HIP process.
Yeah, I just submitted a HIP for that discussion we were having about the log output on the jobs. And when I kind of submitted it, I was kind of going, okay, so what happens next? And I kind of looked through the doc, and it's not really clear what happens next. Like, it's like people will look at it, and will they look at it? Like, what's the, I kind of like, yeah, that's just kind of what I'm wondering. Like, what's like, does there like votes on the HIP process at some point, or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So with the HIPs, it depends on where the HIP is for, because we've got things that go beyond the Helm itself that can go there. For example, they could be about Helm as a whole organization, and we've got some sub projects and other things going on. And so it depends on who it's for. So generally speaking, it's going to need 2 approvals from maintainers in that area. And that's the way Helm works, right? So Helm needs 2 maintainers to sign off on a pull request to go in, unless it's extra small in size. And if it's a Helm maintainer who created the pull request, we considered they sign off on their own pull request, they're good with it because they wrote it, right? And it only needs 1. But otherwise, for anything from the community, needs 2 sign-offs. And the same applies for HIPs. And so it'll need 2 maintainers to approve it and sign off on it. And so just like with the pull request queue and issue queue, we need to get some folks in to review that and give approval on it in order to merge it and move forward. And so we'll have to wrangle some folks.
So what at the moment that the HIP is merged, would it already be accepted at that point? If it's like, so like, does it get marked as either rejected or accepted at the moment the PR is merged, or is it more like that it would get accepted and then it would move forward to, or it would be like in some sort of state that's in between accepted, I guess, like consideration, and then there'd be another PR to actually accept it?
So the different levels, if we look inside the HIPs, I want to say it's in HIP 001. It outlines a bunch of this. Did you read HIP 001?
I
The first
did, but
one?
it wasn't really clear to me.
Okay, and that's
Like,
good feedback. So we have, I'm trying to find it. The status. Oh, where's the status fields? I have to go back and look at this now.
the part that wasn't clear to me is how much happens in the PR, the initial PR, and how much happens like after the like what where how the PR works in relation to the status of the HIP.
Yeah. Normally we wait until it's been accepted before it gets merged in. We wait until we're good with it, and then and then we've accepted it, right? And then once it's accepted, that's when we'll go ahead and merge it.
So what if it turns out like we don't want to do this? Or we're not really doing it as like a like rejected HIPs don't really end up in the repo anymore. We're kind of like just using the PR log as
well,
a.
I think the reality is we probably need to be a little bit better. Many of the HIPs got merged because we are good with them and they were marked draft, and then we've gone off and implemented them, but the follow-up pull request to take them out of draft hasn't happened. So I would just leave it in draft, and then once we get the approvals, then we're good to move forward with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
And we need to do some HIP cleanup here. I think once we get our maintainership in a little bit better shape, we'll have to spend some time on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, some of these need to go. These need to go and get marked as final because they've been done or they're in and they're in draft. So I wouldn't worry. Put it in a draft state and leave it there, and we'll review it and get the 2 pull requests on it or the 2 approvers on it, and then it can be merged and we can move forward.
Awesome.
Is it ready? Is it in shape, ready for people to review it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, any other questions about the HIP process? No, perfect. Karina, you got one on feedback from KubeCon.
So sorry I wasn't able to join last week. So a couple people, and this is a recurring thing that I think every project has, is when I put it into the maintainer chat, somebody came up and said, hey, we really would like to, and is it you, Michael? Because maybe you're the one that was
yeah, I think it was me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to bring it up. So how about you bring it up? That'd be even better.
Yeah, in relation to the, I guess there was one of the meetings there was a description of the review process, and there was a flow chart shown of the review process, and it showed going through triage, and I don't remember exactly now because I haven't looked at it since I was there, but the next step then was that a reviewer is assigned to the pull request for it to be reviewed. And I guess that's something, from what I've seen at least anyway, doesn't really happen. That pull request comes in, it just kind of sits there to a large degree, and it's hard to get it progressed. And I understand from the meetings that I've been to that there is issues there with availability of maintainers and so on. But I think that that's certainly a part of the process that isn't as described, and something it would be great if it was something that could be improved on, that there was more of an active flow for pull requests.
And I'll add to that, because we were also discussing that you and your teams would like to contribute, but you're not sure how. And so Ian and I were talking about, prioritization and how to surface that, and here's a list of what could be looked at, you know, in QE. So Matt, so just more.
Yeah, exactly. So if I do have time to spend on helping out, I guess one of the issues with the PRs being taken so long to get merged is because maintainers only have so much time to spend on them, which is understandable. But then if other people have time to help out, then it's important that that time as well is spent in a constructive way. So rather than me just going in, picking something at random and looking at it and giving some comments, then if there was a more structured approach that people who have time and are willing to help could help in a way that makes the help that they can provide more meaningful, to free up more time for the maintainers to do the stuff that they need to do.
I like that. So let me ask this. Do you have a suggestion on a more structured approach?
Do I have a suggestion? Well, I guess if there was a list of volunteers who are prepared to help, and I'd put my name down for that, and maybe others would as well, that if a pull request does come in, that a core maintainer is assigned to it, but he doesn't necessarily have to review it immediately. He would have some sort of a high level look at it, see does it make sense, is something that's worth reviewing to start with or not. But if it is, then that he could then ask someone on this list of people who are willing to help to review it, and it would be a point of contact. So if I'm reviewing it and I have a question, something I'm not sure about, he could be a point of contact for me to ask a quick question to say, I'm thinking about this. Am I on the right track here or not? Or the Helm maintainer, the core maintainer could also point out, by the way, you might want to look at, so this might be breaking something there, or there was a pull request on this a couple of months ago that, say, I for one wouldn't know about, and he could give pointers, and it could be kind of I don't know if a mentorship type thing is, but something along those kinds of lines where someone can volunteer to help and have a bit of guidance then from a core maintainer in what they're doing.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if we can automatically assign it to a core maintainer right now. We'll have to see who's got what time and how much they can do. But I like the idea of mentoring and getting some of this process through so we can go through it. It's again, the time thing, which is one of those things we're working on. We used to be much better with this on the Helm project, and over time we've gotten worse. And so we're trying to correct and get things back into better shape.
Yep, sure.
I could add maybe a little. I think like a lot of pull requests come in, and my hesitation personally to date with helping so much is that there's just so many, and it's hard to know how we can prioritize. Like an obvious example is if a bug fix comes in, then generally there's no real discussion around, well, no discussion really needed around, like, is this feature wanted because it's not a feature, it's a bug fix. So things like that are easy to kind of review and prioritize. But when people just throw random stuff over the wall around, like implementing some feature that they want, it's a little more awkward to try and do the iterations on that to get into shape. So maybe classifying pull requests might be useful, as in a lot of them just need more refinement, which generally means submitting a HIP, but then not everybody has time to submit HIPs or push back on them and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think a good start is triage maintainers classifying bugs versus feature, because bugs, there's usually not a lot of question or issue on, do we need to go do it? It's a bug. And then we're open to pull requests, and then we can debate, does the pull request solve it in a way that we like it? You know, what are the consequences of the change, that kind of thing. With a feature, it becomes a lot more the separation of concerns. Is this for Helm? Is this for something else? I was talking to someone this morning, and we were talking through, it's really nice that Helm has a separation of concerns. It does package management. If you want to deal with configuration management, go for Flux, go for Helm file, go for the thing in that space you want to use. But Helm isn't trying to do everything. It knows its place in the world. And, it's like the separation between apt-in yum and chef, that kind of thing. We know our place in the world. And so some features we can say, well, this just doesn't belong in Helm. It belongs over here, or it belongs in this space. And we can guide people to the right place. And other things we have to say, okay, is this something we want in Helm? What are the impacts of that? Is there another way to do it? Is it appropriate? We have to ask those kinds of questions in moving forward. And then some of those are small enough we can, do without a HIP, and others are bigger and we'll want a HIP for, because we want to really think things through and make sure everything's covered. And so to guide those. So I think separating those up front can be a good point, because bugs are easier to deal with than features for a lot of folks.
I would say it's also nice to get the bug pipeline tuning through as well, because if there's a bug and it's impacting someone, and
yeah,
not prioritizing those necessarily, but if they're smaller and easier to push through, then I think that will make people happier.
Okay.
So I did put it in chat, but I think you kind of just covered it a bit, is maybe a running list of what's being worked on.
Yeah, and we have the different releases and the issues in those releases, which would help us with it, but it is in woefully bad shape. I'm hopeful that we've got 3.12 coming out. Instead of just taking everything and putting it into the 3.13 or the 3.12.1 release that isn't going to get done, that it can be a little bit more targeted this time, and give feedback on each of them to say, okay, this one we're pulling out. If you want to move forward with it in a release, please do these things and contact these folks. I want to go through each of those, hopefully before Wednesday's release, to move everything into better shape. And it's one of my goals. And I think that would be a good start. If it's something we think we can get into a release, or a bug isn't going to go into a release, I don't think, unless somebody's got a good pull request to fix it, then move them both in. But having a way of doing that to kind of show priorities. Okay, we got a pull request and a bug. We got a bug fix release coming out in 3 weeks. Let's try to tag it over here for this one and see if we can get reviewers on it, right? And I think that's a good way to help people say, this is the priority of what to go review, at least as a start.
I think that'll really help. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, and Joe points out here, there were some folks whose full-time job was maintaining Helm previously, and there is nobody whose full-time job is maintaining Helm. It's now a side thing for everyone involved, and that just happens to be part of it. When you've got full-time people working on something, you get a different pace of change and development than with part-timers.
I like to say volunteers instead of part-timers.
That's true. Volunteers.
There's a large question, I guess, but how does a lot of people use Helm obviously across the industry, not dissimilar to Kubernetes. How does the CNCF and maybe, what am I trying to say here? I mean, I like to contribute, like my company, I use open source personally, all that stuff. But to a certain extent, it's kind of like providing support across to people, which is nice. But if it's there, if people are running a business on top of Helm or whatever, then at what point do we see ourselves as, providing the support to support the project, but versus providing support for people's kind of businesses for free? I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
I'm not even sure if I know what I'm trying to say.
And all the open source stuff with the business side gets a little complicated. So this is kind of my two cents on it. When the cloud native and the Kubernetes ecosystem and everything was being built out, initially, you had a lot of companies invested in it because both companies were flush with cash. We weren't in an economic downturn, and they needed the features to be built out. Once many of these things got into very stable shape, and you entered things like an economic downturn, you end up seeing fewer companies contributing full-time to projects and investing their people in it because they're invested in other areas or they're cutting back. And open source upstream contributions as a whole across the CNCF have come down, right? We've got more projects than ever in the CNCF, but the overall contributions have actually shrunk some. And that's kind of what it's expected when things become a little bit more mature and you end up in an economic downturn. In addition to that, the people who often create new things are not the people who stick around for a long time maintaining them. You know, I can look at someone like Daniel, who created Curl, who still does it after all these decades. He's often a rarity because the people who start things like to be serial starters and they move on. And across the CNCF, and that impacts Helm, you've got some folks who like to start a lot of new things. And so they've started new things and they keep doing that. And you have to backfill with people who maintain things. And the CNCF and Helm, we haven't necessarily done the best job with that, which we're all trying to pick up on now. And so that's kind of the phase things are shifting into. And so you're just seeing lulls, an economic downturn, things getting into a more stable shape, getting more people to maintain things that have just been around. We're at the serial creators all coming together right now. I think that's part of it. And then you get some of the things where you get projects like Kubernetes, which people directly have distributions and are invested in and have companies built on. But how many companies have something directly built on Helm? You see that more minimally these days. You'll have some other projects built on it. And so you don't have some of that, you know, you don't have like a SQLite. You know, there's a company behind SQLite that just does SQLite. And you don't have that for something like Helm, where you might for Linkerd. And so that's also a different aspect to the way you get support and involvement. I work for SUSE. We ship Helm, we use Helm. And so we do invest some time in it, but we only invest so much time because we use a lot of open source. And so this kind of gets into it a little bit. Thank you for the time check. Is there anything else on this, or should we move to the next thing?
No, thank you. I'm sorry for the kind of loaded question.
That's quite all right. I see Joe, a CVE checker for Helm.
Yeah, I think it was you that mentioned the Go, when the Go's own CVE checker. I added a action for that. One of the things it'll help with is we get a lot of issues where bad security checkers are saying that everything under the sun is a CVE for Helm when we don't run servers. So I think this would give us an opportunity to point out that we have our own checks, they are satisfied, and they'll have to mitigate their security on their end.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and you'll see this once we get you set up. GitHub actually provides us insight into which of our dependencies has what issues, and the Dependabot fix for those. So I'll take a look at this, and I wonder if there's going to be overlap between those, and then we just need to get those kind of fixes merged and checked out, maybe a little bit more quickly. But I'll definitely go take a look at this.
Yeah, there's definitely overlap. The advantage of Go Von check is that it's not like source to source dependency checking. It's call chain. Like often a CV will be reported in some package which isn't like the code's just not used, so the CV isn't relevant.
Yeah, we see that a lot with our Containerd usage. Containerd has a fair number of CVEs that are runtime ones that never impact Helm.
Yeah, for example, yeah. So this is nice. I don't know if we want to stick blocking checks in CI. I was about to say this on the PR. Maybe I'll just stay on the PR rather than, I think we've only got 3 minutes.
Yeah, I wouldn't want it because somebody creates a PR related to something entirely unrelated to Helm, and then they get blocked because of a vulnerability in something that has nothing to do with them and their dependency. We may want to shift this to a regular daily job or something, but I think, yeah, looking at this would be good.
As long as it's non-blocking, I mean, it's still nice to know if you made a change and oops, I just brought in the CVE.
You're right. And if CVEs all happened that way, that would be perfect. It's the fact that you discover things and they get reported between two perfectly clean things that you've got a problem. Okay, I'll think about that. Thank you. There was one more retro, I think.
Yeah, this was, I talked to Karina a little bit about this, and I thought I'd bring it up a little bit broader, but I thought it could be really useful, and maybe this is either a dedicated session of this call, or we schedule another call where we get as many Helm users and developers on as we can, and do like a retro of like what's going well in Helm, what we're thinking about in the future, what's not going well in Helm, and just kind of hash it out, create, just do a retro on what's been working and not working.
I like the idea. I would suggest that if we do something like this, we broadcast it out and say, hey, we're doing it here this day. If you've got something, please come, because we get a small audience here, and I think we can get a slightly bigger audience. We may want to schedule it for more than half an hour as well.
Okay, yeah, let's do it then. I'll work on organizing something on that.
Okay. With that, we're coming at time. Do we have anybody for moderator or notes or triage or any of these for next week?
I will continue triaging as well. On
Karina,
It's the best
you
way
said
to-
you can moderate that. Yeah.
it's the best way to hook up with you for the onboarding.
I sent you a link. Go
Oh, did
grab
you?
some time, following the link. Yeah.
I'll check.
All right. So Karina, you said you can do a one or the other, notes or moderator. Is there somebody who'd like to do the other one next week? I'm happy to, but I'm willing to offer. All right. I'll moderate again since I suck at notes. I'll volunteer to do that. All right, folks, then everyone, we are at time. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on next week.
Thank you. See you, everybody.